Alright, so now I'm ready to go into the tank. I've got my Oculus Go and the controller to start the app, and yeah, let's just see what happens. A flotation tank, or sensory deprivation tank, is a pool of water with about 600 pounds of Epsom salts in it. The salts make you float, creating an anti-gravity effect. In addition to this, the water and air temperatures are carefully calibrated to match your body temperature. The result? You no longer notice the air, the water, or the gravity pulling you down. After a while in the tank, you can completely lose your bodily self-consciousness. You no longer feel yourself as a person in relation to an external world. All that is left is your mind, alone with itself. But why combine this with virtual reality? In a way, VR is in itself a sensory deprivation device. It removes sensory stimuli from the real world and replaces it with the virtual. By using VR in a sensory deprivation tank, we are able to remove all impressions of the real world and only exist in the virtual. In using VR in the flotation tank, I was hoping to recreate a psychedelic experience. For 1 hour, I watched and drifted with my eyes focused in meditation on the mandala. What happened? After a while, I stopped identifying with my body and no longer related to the visuals as something necessarily outside me. Towards the end of the experience, I even had my own completely sober hallucinations on top of the visual dimensions of the application. That being said, I'll leave the trip report as I gave it immediately after coming out of the tank. Right, so I'm outside of the tank and I think my Go survived. You can see it's still quite wet. There are some crystals starting to form at the top too, and it's kind of dripping. But regarding the experience, this was awesome. It took about maybe 10 minutes to truly get into the flow of it. But after I had, some very interesting things started to change. Because I was looking at the application which you've been seeing, which has this sort of psychedelic pattern to it. And what happened was that I didn't necessarily pay attention to the pattern as intended, but rather in a more unfocused view of it. Some other patterns between the patterns started to form, sort of like when you're looking at a rock in too long a time. So the tank, I think, helped me in pushing this to some sort of extremes. So I actually had some hallucinations on top of the visuals in the actual VR application. What was especially awesome was, of course, that I didn't have any feeling of weight. So the weightlessness that the tank provided made it possible for me to not feel like I was lying down and looking up to something or looking down at something or in any relation to what I actually was looking at. All in all, this was a great way to actually explore how you can experience the virtual in a new way, because there was no longer the typical relation, at least in the best of the flow state moments that I got into. It wasn't a relation between me as an embodied being and the virtual, it was just purely the virtual experience. So it was a different way for me to actually be able to appreciate and relate to the virtual, not necessarily as a positioned avatar or a user in an environment, but just having that sensory experience and not much else. So yeah, what I'm interested in is thinking of new ways to explore this. So I want to ask the community, what kind of application should I develop to try and test in the tank? What kind of experiments can we do? You know, for instance, you could have a camera that is hovering above me so that I'm able to actually have a out-of-body experience and see if it is possible to shift one's sort of point of consciousness, or where you think that you are in relation to the environment. Or it could be, anything. So we want to ask people, what am I going to develop to actually try in the tank? And I hope that this can be an interesting thing to do together. So one more last thing is that if you like this, please click like at the video and subscribe to the channel, because we want to create more things like this in the future. So thank you.